We bring in our friend Doug Burns. He's with us now. He's a former U.S. attorney who runs his own practice. Doug, it seems like the takeaway is this message to Wall Street: this is serious. Get ready. Am I right in that?
That's exactly the takeaway. A, this is serious. B, deterrence. In other words, you know, guys, we want to deter this activity on Wall Street, and I think the government gets a lot out of that.
Maybe if I'm anxious that somebody's listening to my phone calls, even if they are not, maybe I'm going to behave differently.
Yeah, and the point being, and ironically, it's, you know, part of the appeal. We can talk about that later, but the fact is, you know, a wiretap captures your day-to-day conversations when you don't know it. So that's got to make you think, wow, I mean.
Which is why I assume judges in the past haven't really wanted to go down this road, right? Because even if they're legally allowed to admit this, maybe some judges feel uncomfortable doing so.
Well, the interesting thing is that the wiretap statute doesn't really provide, technically, for the use of a wiretap in an insider trading case. But the argument was we were also gathering evidence of what you call wire fraud and money laundering, and that's really the legal issue. So, I mean, it's somewhat novel to use it in that area. As I've said before, it's usually reserved for organized crime, narcotics trafficking.
It's also expensive, right? It's like $52,000 an operation or something to wire somebody.
Very labor intensive. You have agents monitoring the calls, providing reports to the court, and it is very labor intensive. But here, like I said, the deterrence value is the key.
John Ehrlichman, our reporter, just talking about who's next. I mean, there's going to be a list from Galleon of who's next, who may be facing the same kind of sentencing that Raj Rajaratnam did. And then there's all these expert networks. You just alluded to this wire fraud. There's a lot of charges that are being considered, right?
Oh,
for
yeah, absolutely.
Right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Expert Network is a company based in California in the particular investigation underway now that puts together insiders at tech companies, you know, primarily about, you know, the latest technology with, you know, phones and computers, and then puts them with people in research companies. And the theory being that they're giving them, you know, earnings reports, activation statistics, things like that, which creates an unfair advantage. So that is an area that they're going into, yes.
Doug, if we speak about what's next for Raj Rajaratnam, we know that his lawyer is going to appeal. But it seems like during the case, the judge more or less sided procedurally when possible with the defense.
Yeah, that's a good point. Judge Hallwell is a very fair judge, and the appellate lawyer has to make an examination of the record. People, you know, in the public sometimes get confused, like, you know, this is a revisitation of whether he did the crime. That's not what it is. It's an examination as to what, if any, legal errors were made. And so you have to go through the record in a painstaking fashion and see what rulings he made. But I think you're absolutely right. When you look at it, I'm sure the judge made a number of fair...
The prosecution seems to complain a lot, but now actually they may be happy that the judge overturned a lot of...
It's funny that you say that, right. I mean, the old joke, as it were, is if you worry too much about the Court of Appeals, you're never going to get there as a prosecutor because you may lose the case. But you're exactly right. Now that the case is over and they got a guilty verdict, they're going to be very happy that Judge Hallwell made the pro-defense rulings. But on the wiretap, I think that'll be somewhat interesting because put aside the issue that you're not allowed technically to wiretap for securities fraud because, as I said, they got evidence for other offenses. But also, the judge, this was interesting, he had a 4-day hearing over this called a Franks hearing. And in that hearing, the judge determined, and actually hit the government a little, that they had, you know, not disclosed the full scope of the investigation to the court. And he took a couple of shots at the government there, if you remember. And the fact is that may be something the Second Circuit will look at.
How easy is it going to be for prosecutors to claim another scalp here? The cases that are coming up aren't as cut and dried as the Raj case, are they?
Yeah, no, this is a big scalp, and that's why I keep saying that this particular case they have to use for deterrence. In other words, to scare Wall Street, to put it simply, into thinking that their phones are being tapped. But I think, honestly, you may not see that many wiretap insider trading cases. I mean, they did it in this case. As I said, you know, the wiretap statute doesn't list insider trading or securities fraud as an offense.
It has to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis.
I mean, in other words, you know, a little law professor theory, Congress saw fit to authorize wiretapping in certain types of crimes, not this one.
How about the whole expert network situation? It is one thing to convict somebody on charges of insider trading when you have wiretaps. There is no bright line, between good research and inside information when it's coming from a third party like an expert network. How is a prosecution going to take that up? And how is a jury going to answer a question like that?
What you're asking me, which is a very good way to put it, is what would this case have looked like if they didn't have wiretaps, is what I think you're asking. Right.
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is, one professor pointed out, and he's right, the world is dealing with more and more available information. So from that standpoint, insider trading may become harder to prove, because Dowd, you talk about the government sending a message. John Dowd sent the message that the cases are going to be defended on the theory that in this unbelievably complicated matrix of information that we deal with every day, this stuff is already available.
So the mosaic theory may not have worked in Raj's case
because of wiretaps. Sorry to interrupt you.
For others.
Exactly.